Firth, and my discourse is psychology, and I will just be presenting some conventions and rhetoric used in these research articles to give you guys a better understanding of how research is presented within this discourse and how their papers are written. First off, just to look at overall organization, each of the three articles that I analyzed had abstract pieces, which is basically a little paragraph that shows up even if you can't access the article. The overall organization is pretty similar beyond this piece that ties them all together, but it really differs depending on topic, whether they're honing in on a certain mental illness or a tendency or disorder or anything like that, that kind of where it tends to vary, and rhetoric varies based on that too. So after the abstract comes the introduction, and then which looks pretty similar for most of these, as you can see. In this article, it goes abstract, introduction, and then this has this little piece right here which gives you each section, and you can just click on and go to, which is pretty common to find in psychology research articles as well. And then methods in research is something that they all include, which is really the heart of the article and where like the bulk of the information resides. And then following that, they use all the evidence they presented to come to a conclusion, summary, discussion, whatever it's called, in these things. So taking a closer look at the abstract of each of these articles is kind of the attention grabber of whatever topic. So because of that, it mixes in more complex psychology terms with common terms like fear, self-esteem, genetics, to kind of widen their audience. And if they do use those more complex psychology terms, they're defining those, and they're not letting anyone that might not be as educated, and not leaving them in the dark, and allowing them to be intrigued by whatever they're researching. And those common words / feelings people may struggle with can appeal emotionally, and this is where kind of the only area of research where we see like pathos possibly being used, and that emotional appeal, as far as finding a person that says, oh, I struggle with this, hopefully there's an advancement in this area of psychology, I'm going to check out what this research is. And then after abstract goes straight into the introduction, and it further define whatever terms that they'll be using, which is really seen in this childhood onset of schizophrenia article, where they're clearly defining what they're working with, where it's found, what the lifetime prevalence is, and like how often it's diagnosed, and just really getting into it. This is the most like abstract kind of mental disorder, whatever you want, mental illness piece that I kind of looked at. The other two articles really just focus on narcissism and some more common mental things that happen with people and aren't as extreme as some may say schizophrenia is. So they really focus on defining that in that article. And then most of the introductions allude to how this research is going to progress the field, how what they're going to talk about is going to progress the field, and their primary purpose behind what their research is going to look at, which is exactly what this article regarding narcissism and delinquency is going into. It talks about the purpose, and then also how it's going to fill a developmental gap in the literature or the research behind it. So kind of introduction serves to narrow the topic and to usually present a hypothesis or some question that they're asking or some correlation that they think might exist, which leads straight into the methods in research, how they come to this correlation, which is more traditionally done in the narcissism and delinquency, as they do their own research on their own survey. Heavy ethos across all three articles in these sections. It's really built for credibility. All of these sections are covered in footnotes and references presenting aspects of psychology research in a particular topic. The conventions do vary. This is the only one, narcissism and delinquency, out of the three that I looked at, that was able to use their own research and surveys to create a table of correlations. The article regarding onset of schizophrenia was able to use a table, but it was from existing research in the field. This is the main part of all of the articles. It really stacks the empirical evidence in bulk regarding their topic and their hypothesis, showing you the evidence, the science behind everything that they're saying. After presenting that, leads into the final part of these articles, which is the discussion, summary, and conclusion, which serves to do exactly what all these do: apply and conclude their research to the field, addresses correlations, which, like I said, is most possible for the narcissism and delinquency, because they did their own survey, and they're able to say we found these correlations and therefore we're making this statement. The other two articles more summarize findings from the field, the existing research that they looked at, and apply it to their hypothesis. And then after it's applied to their hypothesis, this leads into further research, which all three articles talk about how further research can be done in the topic that they discussed and what questions could be raised, because the scientific field is always growing, it seems, in this discourse. And then there's usually a clinical or a medicinal application, which is pictured right here. This is in the Onset of Schizophrenia article. It talks about targets for drug development and then implications for clinical practices. And the Narcissism and Fear and Decision-Making article also goes into possible clinical or counseling options or or application, sorry, and talking about how possible therapeutic outcomes could advance the field based off their finding. This is also where the arguments are presented. So these applications and arguments are presented utilizing a lot of ethos, referring to the evidence that they just showed you in the methods and research, kind of condensing it and having a long list of references immediately following kind of their ending statement saying this is what can be concluded from the research done. Like, there are more questions to ask, but this is kind of what we got to, and then it's like boom, and then a bunch of references, which definitely helps for credibility. It's also just built logically. By presenting and condensing research looked at, you're able to make a logical conclusion based clearly on scientific evidence. So rhetoric plays a large role in the conclusion summary piece of this, and it really seems like you can understand psychology is trying to be taken more seriously as a hard science, constantly backing themselves with evidence throughout everything that they're doing in this discourse. And that's what most of these research papers focused and honed in on throughout their writing. Thank you.